Hello and welcome. This is a video tutorial for teachers to show how to use my student engagement feedback method. This method is designed to collect data about student engagement and then to present students with their own data as a way of achieving several things. One of those things is to try and leverage students' intrinsic motivation to remain on task and achieve their personal best in terms of their classwork completion. Every 2 weeks, I give students this feedback sheet that's based on Hattie's feedback model of where am I going, how am I going, and what next. In terms of where am I going, I include a summary of the learning goals for that fortnight period, and then I explain the success criteria for those learning goals for that fortnight period. Then in the how am I going, I include data about how much classwork students have completed, and then their informal quiz scores, so Kahoot quiz scores or other kinds of platforms that I use for informal assessment. I collect all that data and I share with students how they've been achieving in that area. In terms of the completion data, basically the way I use it is, so for example, this student, this is based on real data, but it's been anonymized. This student was achieving 100% classwork completion, and they were recognized every fortnight for their high classwork completion. Every 2 weeks, I have a conversation with students one-on-one for a few seconds, and I congratulate them on their hard work. I also will give them a merit or an affirmation in our online system. However, whenever students drop off a bit, so for example, especially around here, when this student completed 50% of the classwork in week 5 to 6 in the middle of term 2, I then had a conversation with them, obviously more than a few seconds. I spent a couple of minutes to talk with that student about giving positive feedback, positive encouragement, and setting forward-looking goals about how to improve their classwork completion in the future. And then they did. They bounced back and they were back to 100%. This doesn't work with every single student, but quite a lot of students, or the majority in my experience, really want to do their personal best in this area. And so they have a lot of intrinsic motivation. As soon as they realize that their classwork completion data is dropping, they want to bring it back. They want to have this hard evidence that, look, mum and dad, I'm achieving 100% in my classwork completion. Also, some students will look like this. They will be 100% across the board. And those students also deserve that recognition to know that they're being noticed, and that I know that they are achieving 100% and that they should be congratulated for that. Okay, so now that I've explained what I use this for, I'm going to show you how to input the data and how to generate these feedback sheets for students. So the first thing we're going to do is go over to the Student Data Summary tab at the very beginning, and we're going to input our student names. So I have used ChatGPT to generate random names. These are not real names. If any of these names match a real life person, it is by pure coincidence. So I'm going to highlight my family names here. I'm going to go over here and input them here into the surname column. And then I'm going to go over here and get my first names and put them in the first name column. Now it's going to stitch them together so that on the sheet it will have their name listed like this. Then I'm going to name the class. So in this case, I teach Year 8 languages, for example, and that class code is going to be 08 Languages A, for example, for that class. And let's just drag that down. Now you might notice that there are a few empty spaces at the bottom because in our classes, we have maximum 30 students, but I allow an extra 5 spaces so that if any students join the class late, I can add them down the bottom without having to add a row, and which can cause problems in other tabs later on. It works out better if I simply add them to the bottom of the list when they join the school. Okay, so then I'm going to go over here and add my second class. Now, the reason these class names are in there is because it's useful to be able to filter by class when you want to isolate the data from one class. And you can also filter that way. You can do this on any of these sheets, which I'll show you soon. You can filter by that or just bring it back up. Okay, so now you've entered your students' names and the classes. We're going to now enter the data for their classwork completion. So we go over here to the classwork completion record. We're going to choose the lesson. So in our fortnight cycle, year 8s, we have 5 lessons a fortnight, and our seniors have 8 lessons a fortnight. Okay, so let's say we're at the beginning of week 3 to 4. I'm going to enter the data for the classes that, for the tasks that these students completed. So what I like to do is I like to go in and hit Alt, Enter. That will create a new line. Leave the numbers of the tasks as they are because this is a table, so every column title has to be unique. But then I'm going to enter what it was. So I'm going to say it was lesson 25, worksheet 2.3 or whatever it is. So that's the task that they had to complete. And then let's say the next task was going to be a Kahoot, and I'll enter the name of the Kahoot there. And then let's say they had to complete another worksheet after that, worksheet 2.4. Okay, now I'm going to enter in what it is that, how much of that task they completed. So I don't get confused, I'm going to just isolate the class so that there's not too many names there. So let's just say that most people achieved 100% of the classwork here. I'm just going to drag and drop it down, drag 100% down. Then I know there were a few students who were absent. For those students who were absent, I'm going to add an X next to their name. So let's say those 3 students were absent. And then let's say I know that this student only completed 80% of the worksheet and this one did about 75% of the worksheet. Okay, done. Now we're going to go over to the Kahoot. So I'm going to copy that over. I'm going to remove the X. There's a reason for that. Is because these X's, they calculate how many times the student is absent over here. So how many times they're absent from my class. Each X will be calculated as a count if. So for that lesson over here, I'm only going to put 1 X for each lesson. But I'm going to leave it blank. So I'm going to remove those X's. So it doesn't count as an extra absence. Now, for this one, everyone completed 100% because Kahoot's very popular. Alrighty. And then over here, this worksheet over here, this is where students probably fell off the rails a little bit more. Let's just say this student only did 50%. This student lost focus, only did 30%. And let's say this student as well only did 50%. So they did half the worksheet or one side of a double worksheet or whatever equals 50%. Okay, so now I've entered that data. I also want to keep track of the informal assessment scores. So this is optional if you wanted to do this. You can edit the template if you don't want to keep track of informal assessment scores. Not everything will go in here, but anytime I do something like a Kahoot, I will enter this. So let's go over here, isolate class A. So let's go week 3 to 4, and I'm going to add in their accuracy score. So let's say it's 87%, 68. Okay, so I've now added in the scores from that Kahoot. I'll also click up here, hit Alt, Enter, and I'm going to name the Kahoot. So now I've entered the informal quiz data, the informal assessment data, and I've also already entered the classwork completion for that lesson. Let's pretend we're now at the end of the fortnight cycle. We're at the end of the week's 3 to 4 fortnight cycle. I'm now ready to give my students their classwork completion feedback. So what we do is we go over to feedback back end. We start here. The first thing we're going to do is update our learning goals. So you can go in here and update whatever you change here. So I'll give you an example. Whatever you change here will automatically change on all of these sheets. So you can see I've said XYZ there. All of these sheets will update based on whatever you type here. And same for here, the term. So at the moment, it's showing term 3, and it's showing weeks 1 to 2. But this is the feedback for weeks 3 to 4. So I'm going to type here 3 to 4. Whenever you have a dash, it might think it's a mathematical sum or a deduction, minus. So you should put an apostrophe and then 3 to 4, and the apostrophe will avoid it, treating it like an equation. Go over here to feedback. It's already updated now, week 3 to 4. Then also the ways to improve. Whatever you type here, it will update it down the bottom here in your feedback. Lastly, whatever you change here on this very first sheet from A1 over here, whatever you change on in terms of like student, this title up here, and these ones in blue, whatever you change there, it will change it for every sheet. So if you wanted to change the title of this sheet, you to just simply class feedback, for example, or classwork feedback, or class feedback, whatever it is, then it will change it for all of those sheets as well. So just check wherever there's a formula, you can see this formula, wherever there's a formula in that cell, then that means it's linked. If it's just simply equals and then a cell reference, it equals something from this first page. Okay, so now we've finished adding our learning goals, updating the weeks and all that. We're now going to go over and enter our data into this table. The reason the data is not already appearing in the table is because if there is no data entered, it will appear as a 0 on this graph, and it will appear that the student did 0 work that fortnight, which is not accurate. So I don't add the data until there is data for that fortnight. So what you're going to start off with is making sure that over here at classwork completion record, this filter is select all. Make sure it says select all. Then we're going to go over to feedback backend. We're going to find the week that we want to enter. Click on the very top cell, we hit equals. Now we go over to classwork completion record. We find that one, so that's weeks 3 to 4. We go over to this blue section over here. And we are now going to find term 3, weeks 3 to 4 completion. That's the data we want to enter. So I click it and then I just hit enter. And what's going to happen is because this is a table, it will automatically add all the cell references down for the whole table. Now I have some data that I want to appear on. That data is so that I have a number here in this table. So I go over here and I'm going to click equals. This is term 3 completion, whole term 3 completion. Go to classwork completion. I go over here to the term averages and I'm going to go term 3 average and hit enter, and it now enters it there. So now I have a number in this box. I then go over here and I want the quiz scores. I now have some data that I want to show up. That data is to appear here as an ongoing average. So I go over here, I click equals, I go to informal assessment, I go to the very end, and we're looking at the total average for the term. So this is term 3 average, number 92. So then I hit enter, and it should add it for all. Okay, one more thing. You might notice that there's this little error message here. That's just because that student has no data. Perhaps they were absent that day. That one can affect the data. So let's have a look at what student that is. That is Alicia Fernandez. So let's have a look at Alicia Fernandez. So over here, it's appearing as a 0 because there's an error that there's no data for that student for that period, because perhaps they were not in class at all. So what you should do is go and delete any of those errors so that it doesn't affect the presentation of the data. So just basically go through and delete anything that has DIVX, any error message. And then same for over here as well if there's any error message. And then when you go back, it's going to fix itself. So now there's no 0 appearing where that student wasn't at school and it wasn't the case that they were in class and just did no work. Okay, so now you've entered your data. You're now ready to give this to the students. So what I do is I go to the top, hit Control P. I'm going to make sure that it's turned on to print all, not print selection. So I'm going to go print active sheets. And then I'm going to go through and print the ones that I want. So this is page 1. The last person at the end of class A is on page 30. So I'm going to go and print pages 1 to 30. And I'm going to change it to one-sided, print it off, and I give it to the students. And then I use that as a basis for the conversation. So that's all their feedback for that fortnight cycle. Okay, so now that process has been explained, I'll just explain a couple more tips and tricks and other things that are within this template. So the first thing would be when you are entering your class work completion, you might notice that there are a lot of columns and it can get a little overwhelming trying to find what column you're up to. So once you've finished with that data and you don't need to enter any more data, what I do is I select the columns that I don't need anymore, hitting Shift and then clicking the columns with Shift pressed down. I then right click and hit Hide, and that will hide those columns so that as soon as I open up the spreadsheet, it's up to the column that I want. If you want to unhide them, you just click again, hold down Shift, click there, and then you can right click and hit unhide and it will unhide them. So I do the same for the informal assessment as well. As I go through, I just hide the columns I don't need anymore so that I know where I'm up to. Okay, so the other thing is we have a few other in here. The first one is organization. I like to use this. Anything that's in gray is a template to print. I like to go in here, and for the day that I have that class, I go through, get the class list going. And let's say this is lesson 4, and for this class, it's lesson 5 in that fortnight cycle. I then highlight and print this to take into class with me. And you go print selection. I then take this into class with me, and then I physically mark off anyone who didn't have a charged laptop that lesson or who didn't have a pen. And then I can use that for if I need to record a learning organization, but the main reason I do it is to keep track of those who are forming a pattern of not bringing the required learning materials. So once I have that data, I go into the organization record and I enter that data. So this is how many times this student came to class without a charged laptop. It's only once so far for these students. But as soon as it becomes like, for example, this student back here in term 1, by the way, these are not real students, but it is real data. It's anonymized. This student here had 4 times of not bringing a charged laptop and 5 times, etc. So that's where I need to, that's definitely a pattern. Once it gets to 2 or 3 times, I would have a conversation with that student. Same with pens. What I've started doing from this term is I've started immediately adding the date that it happened, or the dates that it happened as under review and new comment, so that I can also keep track of when it was happening. Then what happens is you have your totals. So during parent-teacher conferences, I have some pretty good data on the students' learning organization. Okay, so that's the organization. I also have another one, which is class release sheet. So I have this sheet that was based on what another teacher had prepared. I highlight that again, Control P, print selection, print that off. I have a few of those, and I fill it in every time a student is late, how many minutes they were late, and whenever they go to the bathroom, when they come back, so that I can input that into our Compass system, but also so that I can keep track of how many minutes a student has been out of class on a day that they were present. So once I've got the times and whatever written down, I then go over to class release record, and I then input the data in how many minutes they were late. Generally what I do is, so for example, this student has 16 total. what I do is I hit equals and then I add each time. So let's say this time they were late for another 3 minutes. I just put +3, etc. And I just add it up as I go. I also like to leave a note as to when it happened as well, because I did see a pattern that some students were coming late at the same time every fortnight. Also, how many minutes in the bathroom, I also added again, how long they've been out in the bathroom or how long they've been down to student services, etc. And what happens is this gives me a total time out. So in term 1, lateness and bathroom breaks, this student had lost 47 minutes of class time just for my subject. They'd also lost in term 2, 30 minutes. So this means I have good data to trigger conversations with that student and with their parent. Okay, so that's all on using this template. Feel free to update the template however you would like, and I will provide a blank copy with no data yet in it. You just have to set it up with your student names, but all the formulas are in there already, ready for you to go and to use. So hopefully you find this useful, and thank you for watching.